Hello. Judging from the title of the video, you might be wondering how a band that sounds like this can take inspiration from this. This video will answer that question, but first, we must ask, who are the Sawtooth Grin? Forming in 1999 in Montrose, New York, the Sawtooth Grin would be right at the cusp of the growing mathcore scene of the late 90s. Bands such as Dillinger Escape Plan and Botch were blowing people's minds with their abrasive sound. Though the Sawtooth Grin took much inspiration from these bands, they hardly conformed to the expectations of their genre. With their first record, 2001's Cuddle Monster, the band set out to piss off as many people as possible. With Rich Lombardi on vocals, Tommy Robertine on drums, Chris Ruckle Walker on bass, and the newly joined Jason Springman on guitar, the band was formed. In an interview from 2017 with Sheep and Wolf's Clothing, Rich describes what he wanted for the front cover of their first record.
And it was literally just like, I don't want the name on the cover, I don't want the album title on the cover.
The album art lacking a title or band name seems to be a deliberate attempt by Rich to alienate the audience. They did something similar with the lyrics. Instead of printing them on the CD booklet inside, they printed them directly onto the CD, making it impossible to read the lyrics while listening to the album. The only thing on the cover is a cartoonish creature, the Cuddle Monster. Where other mathcore bands of the time presented themselves very seriously, the Sawtooth Grin chose to display something almost childlike. Again, the title of the album itself, Cuddle Monster, was meant to be read as non-threatening, as innocuous, giving the listener no warning to the chaotic music they're about to hear inside.
But we kind of cultivated a true sense of sort of spite and antagonism for essentially anything that other bands were doing, anything that bands were doing to try to be perceived as hard or tough or intimidating or scary. We just sort of like, well, let's just go the opposite. Let's go the opposite. And you don't get much more the opposite than Cuddle Monster, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's just
sure.
completely ridiculous.
Jason DeZuzio, the studio engineer they worked with in order to record the album, had never worked with a band that made heavy music before. As a result, the album sounds more raw than a typical album by a heavy band. As well as the production being unorthodox for a heavy band, guitarist Jason Springman would do seemingly everything he could to make his guitar tone sound different from every other mathcore band at the time. Where other bands would tune their guitars down to sound more heavy, Jason would tune his guitar up to F standard. In addition, Jason has said he wanted to record the entire album in clean tone.
The engineer and like the other dudes in the band had to talk me down off a lot of stuff. Like there was a lot of like down tuning happening at the time. I was just like, dude, I'm tuned. I brought my guitar to the studio tuned up to F standard. I was just like, we're gonna tune up. I'm gonna record everything just clean channel. It's just gonna be like the most fucking counterintuitive, like
Your
just
original plan
spiteful
was
thing.
all clean channel.
Yeah, just no distortion.
I can't believe I would have said no to that. Did I say no to that?
I don't remember who said
In
no to it.
retrospect, I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Before the Sawtooth Grin had formed, Rich and his friends would frequent local hardcore shows in their area. Rich describes the bands as trying to sound tough. With his vocals, Rich didn't want to sound tough. Instead, he wanted to try and terrify the audience, imagining what it would sound like if he were being murdered.
What if I actually, instead of like doing a voice, like what if I just scream as hard and like what if I was being killed? What would it sound like? You know what I mean? Would it sound tough? Probably not. It would sound crazy.
Rich sought to subvert the tropes of his genre and polarize his audience, with a disturbing vocal style and an abrasive edge. Lombardi chose to record his vocals as close to the live setting as possible, wanting to capture the space and the peaking of a mic. We took a very expensive studio mic and stuffed it in the back of a piano. Then I had a handheld to scream directly into, so we had the two mics going a bit hot to get that live feel. I think we hit an interesting midpoint between psychotic and annoying, my true wheelhouse. As a result, there is a lot of heavy peaking on the vocals, making them even more ear-piercing and abrasive. And now, for the pivotal question. Where did Rich Lombardi get the inspiration to scream like that? Well, the answer will certainly surprise you.
You remember the James Brown box set that you had that was like every fucking thing that James Brown ever recorded?
Yep.
So there is an extended cut on that set. I'll never forget it. And it was an extended cut of Mother Popcorn. And he, like, halfway through that tune, he rips the most insane shriek you have ever heard in your entire life.
Where many other bands pull influence from others within their genre, members of the Sawtooth Grin would look beyond to completely different genres for inspiration, ranging from funk, R&B, and experimental jazz. They would take aspects of these genres and transform them to fit the music they are creating, finding new and innovative ways to sound like the sound equivalent of a sadomasochistic orgy.
By the time Pervivore came out, I probably hadn't listened to metal in like over a year, and it was mostly like a lot of funk and a lot of jazz that I was listening to. And when you understand the lexicon of the music, and then you can really start incorporating different styles into that metal, then that's where a lot of your creativity comes out.
During the days of Cuddle Monster, the lyrics were never much of a concern for the band. Rich has often said that what the band was saying was not as important as the way they were saying it, except for maybe the second to last track,
saying what's in the smoking section, but you didn't like the creepy waiter,
which was written about the Westchester Diner, a diner where the band would go and talk about writing songs. But on the band's most recent record, Good, the lyrics are seemingly more meaningful, often alluding to themes of fatherhood and loss, whereas before the lyrics would lean more towards murder, heartbreak, and insanity. Though the lyrics from before were effective in being disturbing, people have grown numb to that imagery. Rich figured that the only way to get a reaction out of people now would be to go in the opposite direction. A common theme throughout the band's existence is spite. Rich chose to record his vocals like that out of spite. Jason Springman chose to tune his guitar to F standard out of spite. They chose not to put out a lyric sheet out of spite. The band will tell you this themselves.
We kind of cultivated a true sense of sort of spite and antagonism.
A strong need to push back against the tropes of the scene. To say, I'm not a tough guy. I'm not a punk rock puritan. In fact, punk isn't even my first choice. I'm going to go out and listen to some jazz. I'm going to go out and listen to some James Brown. Punk rock was formed to rebel against one thing. But what happens when punk rock forms its own hierarchy? Well, that's when you need to rebel, like the Sawtooth Grin.